Director of Public Prosecutions for England and Wales is to consult on new guidelines on social media abuse after the diver Tom Daley received an offensive Twitter message.
The footballer who sent the tweets will not face charges, but Keir Starmer QC said the case highlighted the growing number involving the use of social media. He says the guidance will help police, courts and service providers decide what is and isn't acceptable. Rupinder Bains is an internet defamation lawyer who's represented a woman who fought to reveal the identities of those who targeted her online with malicious messages. And Podrick Reedy is the news editor of Index on Censorship. Welcome to you both. Thank you for joining us. First of all, what I would like to know is if somebody says something that's racist or insulting to you or harasses you or stalks you on social media, surely the laws governing that kind of action and the punishment that can be handed out is exactly the same without using social media.
It is. The difference is at the moment is the playground of the social media is so vast with Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, what have you, that you need specific sentencing criteria to determine what is offensive, what is grossly offensive. And although we have legislation at the moment, the Communications Act, the Miscommunications Act, nothing is actually there to deal with social media. And this is the gap that hopefully these new proposals will aim to fill.
Podrick, you're pretty worried about anything dealing with social media, aren't you?
I am. I think we have a wonderful opportunity that has presented itself in the past couple of years, where so many more people are able to interact and talk to each other, and obviously within that there will be some malicious and offensive communication. But I'm very glad that that Keir Starmer has recognised that social media does have to have specific guidelines, not just on sentencing, but also on what the police and the Crown Prosecution Service should and should not pursue. Because we've seen people get caught up with very innocent things, very stupid jokes, such as Paul Chambers of the Twitter joke trial, who joked that he was going to blow up an airport, which was very clearly, just a silly thing to say, but certainly not criminal. And that took up 2 years of his life. And I would hope that in this consultation we will eventually end up with sensible guidelines giving the police and the Crown Prosecution Service leeway to look at things and be able to say, we have to look at the exact context of this. Is it a joke? Is it a one-off? Is it some child just not even realising how offensive he's being? And then proceeding from there.
It is a very difficult balance to strike, though, is it? I mean, how offensive does something have to be before it's deemed to be criminal? It's
very subjective. What one person deems as being offensive, another person may not. Hopefully what they'll do is put it in context. There's a whole host of, consultations that will take place now over the coming months and perhaps going on to a year, and they'll have to assess things like the ages of the people perpetrating these comments, the victims, etc., what exactly is being said, how the context in which it's said. All of these factors will need to be taken into equation.
But do you think that anything that's said that's offensive can ever be criminal? I mean, does it not have to be a campaign of harassment rather than an offensive comment? I mean, in terms of freedom of speech, you should be allowed, shouldn't you, to say something that other people find offensive?
Certainly. I mean, there's very little point in defending free expression if we don't defend things that some people find offensive. And you're right, we have to look at the difference between simple offence and, as I say, harassment. So that would be the difference between one tweet and maybe a stream of emails. But this is exactly the problem with the laws that we have at the moment, is that they haven't been designed for the way that people communicate these days. So when people talk about menacing communications, as we've seen some prosecutions under, we're talking about heavy breathing phone calls, email abuse, that kind of thing. We're not talking about Facebook pages and tweets.
Social media has just made it easier, though. If people have got a vengeance against you personally or your organisation, it's easier to get through to that person, isn't it? Where before you used to have to try and dig out the phone number or find out where they live. And it's taken a long time for this to actually be discussed properly, hasn't it? And how to deal with it properly.
An incredibly long time. I mean, children are affected, teenagers are affected, celebrities are affected. This, however, is only going to deal with one aspect of the problem, because there's another larger problem here, which is anonymity of the web. And until that is tackled, I think even the sentencing guidelines will only just scratch the surface of what the problem
Don't
actually
service
is.
providers know exactly who's using their websites?
It's not as easy as that. I mean, you can. They do normally track the, the providers, and they have the details of the computers from which you're logging into. But there's static IP addresses and dynamic IP addresses. It becomes highly complex, and it's not necessarily goes back to the actual computer where it's coming from.
There can be very serious consequences, as we know, teenagers, and I know certainly of one case in the United States when someone, after cyberbullying, has actually taken their own life. But in the majority of cases, is there not a sense that actually you can just not look at it? You can turn it off. You can not have a Facebook account. You can not have a Twitter site. In a way, you have a choice.
There's always the choice of closing your accounts if you have one, or having it open to selective members of your family, friends, etc. But in this current day and age, social media is vital. Prospective employers, they will look up prospective employees and have a look at their Facebook accounts, etc. And these sorts of comments can easily be found on just doing a search on someone's name, and it really can affect and harm your life in general.
What safeguards I mean, just say you are receiving abuse from somebody that you know or don't know whether you know, on Twitter or on Facebook or on the internet. What can you do to stop that, to put that to an end? Even if you don't want to go down the line of prosecution, maybe you just don't want to see it anymore, read it anymore, you are finding it offensive.
Number one is quite simply that there is the block button. You can just cut people off and not...
On Twitter? Can you do that on Twitter?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because all I've ever found on Twitter is to report spam. I'm useless, though.
That doesn't work. That doesn't work.
You can report them to Facebook.
That doesn't work.
It will take a long time. But I mean, there is an argument to be made of can we just simply ignore these people? And obviously, it's not always these simple. Sometimes there is real harassment going on, but. Well, I'll say, we're in an emerging culture, we're in a very new culture. Over the past few years, really, is only that we've been really getting to grips with this totally new. Just
before you get into that, though, what happens if somebody creates a website about you or posts comments about you on a blog site, which is really difficult to police? What happens then?
Well, we deal with this all the time. We deal with this very, very commonly for individuals, for businesses, professionals. And the first step we do is to write a cease and desist letter to the website itself to tell them this is a defamatory comment and it's got to be removed. Otherwise, they themselves are just as guilty as the person putting up the comment as being the host of the website.
It must be said. If you're a conduit, it's a bit like suing the post office for a defamatory letter. It must be, they are merely conduits. They cannot see every single thing that goes through the site.
No, they can't. But when it's brought to their attention, then they need to take it down if it's a defamatory comment, and they do. Most of them oblige.
Rupinder and Patrick, many thanks for coming in and sharing your views with us. Thank you.
Thanks.